the thing that started this conversation in the first place was a post that said,
Right.
unpopular confession. Sometimes I agree with Candace Owens. And
Correct.
the guy who posted it said, I agree with her a lot, actually. And so then I said, of course, nah. I mean, I believe that things that she's saying are poison pills. She lies a lot. And I think you said she didn't spread poison. And I guess it was kind of centered around George Floyd, because someone asked me for an example. The original poster asked me for an example, and I said her lying about George Floyd having died of an overdose, or the lie that the victim mentality, not victimhood, has kept Black Americans back in this country.
Correct.
All right. So I guess since I made the argument, I can try to defend it very briefly. For one, I mean, which I feel like those are two different arguments. Which one would you rather tackle first?
Well, like I said, it was about Candace Owens, but then you said about the victim mentality. Well, you know what? We can start with the George Floyd thing. We can start there.
Okay. So with the George Floyd, the reason why I feel like she lied about that is because I think to spread misinformation that he died of an overdose, like there's autopsies, there's like literal coroners and people whose job it is to analyze the body and discover what it is that caused the death. In this case, you had the original coroner, and you had a second independent coroner hired by the family. So you have two coroners, the state coroner and the independent coroner, both of whom mentioned that George Floyd died due to compression on his neck. So if the compression on his neck caused a loss of oxygen, and both coroners ruled his death a homicide because of that, I have to question why Candace Owens would think that she knows better, and why you would think Candace Owens knows more than both of those coroners.
Great question. So, so you brought up the autopsy, and I just pulled it up myself here. So,
Okay.
the one from Hennepin County.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, and well, first off, I want to point out or talk about you're saying that she lied, as in this is just her words that she's just coming up with, which I would disagree. All right. So based on the autopsy report, if you check the weight of George Floyd's heart, his heart was enlarged. I can't remember how big, but it was bigger than normal size. In most cases, those happen due to drugs or due to drugs. Okay. So now I do want to note that what the officer did was stupid. He had no reason to have his knee on his back. So I do want to throw that, put that out there. But if you also actually look at the video, the knee wasn't on his neck. The knee was kind of on the upper back area.
That's not true.
No, I looked at the video.
Would you like to see a screenshot right now?
Yeah, you can send me a screenshot, and I can send you a screenshot as well.
Okay.
But yes, but yeah, it was on the lower back. But okay, but yeah, even like I said, his knee is on his back or whatever. You can't ignore the enlarged heart, and then now you can say it expedited due to the stress or tension of the situation, right? But the enlarged heart was for sure due to or is a result of drugs. So you can't necessarily say it was lack of oxygen when there was when you looked at the we also read the autopsy report, there was nowhere saying that there was any type of blunt force or blunt strain on his body. That doesn't say on the autopsy.
Okay, so you just said right now, number one, you can't say that it's due to loss of oxygen, and you're right. I can't, because I'm not a coroner. I'm not a doctor. I didn't do the autopsy. Who can say that would be the two coroners who did, and it feels like still you didn't necessarily answer my question. So again, I have to ask you. Two coroners both stated that his cause of death was due to trauma from compression on his neck, which resulted in his lack of oxygen. Two coroners stated that. What makes you think Candace Owens knows more than those hired professionals whose job it was to determine the outcome and the cause of his death? If both of them have said it, Why do you believe Candace Owens knows more? Again, you can bring up any extraneous things, such as the size of his heart, or his history of hypertension, or his history of drug use. You can bring up any of those things. If those things were the complications that caused the death, it would be there in the coroner or in the autopsy. The medical professionals whose job it is to determine the cause of death both disagree with you. So why do you still believe Candace Owens as opposed to those two medical professionals?
No, great. So again, this is what I think you're misunderstanding or mishearing me. I'm not saying anything. I'm telling you what I'm reading from the autopsy report. So they say, okay, no life threatening injuries identified, no facial, oral, mucosal, or conjunctival. If I'm butchering this, conjunctival pedi. So no injuries of anterior muscle or of neck or large. These big medical words, so I can't pronounce them all. But yeah, so I'm reading straight from the autopsy report. So this is not my word. So I'm not going against an examiner. I'm reading the autopsy report, and nowhere on the autopsy report am I seeing blunts or stress to the neck. Because again, what I'm reading, page 2, no type of injury was there. But again, what I'm seeing also in the autopsy report is an enlarged heart and heavy doses of fentanyl and other drugs. So that's again, it's not me saying it. It's not Candace Owens saying that. This is the autopsy report.
Okay, so again, the autopsy is going to point out all sorts of things. Yes, it did. It did point out that there was 11 nanograms of fentanyl in his system. They did find that. Of course, that is not a lethal amount. Number one, there have been numerous studies of people who have gotten DUIs. This number is actually less than the average person who got a DUI while on fentanyl. So the idea that that amount would be lethal is just not true. So then
Well,
hold on, one more.
no, go. You right. Go ahead. You right.
One other thing is it does mention that he has hypertensive heart disease and arteriosclerotic, however you pronounce that, arteriosclerotic. Okay, but so they're pointing out to you these things. But ultimately, in their testimony in the office, I mean, in their testimonies, they both stated that he died from the loss of oxygen.
Okay. Oh, excuse me. So now, one thing that I would say this then, I will meet you in the middle here. I would meet you in the middle and agree that the stress or everything probably played a part in it. But I think probably where we kind of differ or disagree is to or try to make it or paint it out. The sole reason he died was due to the knee, which I disagree with. If you want to say accelerated or his heart, his heart being enlarged and the stress of everything going on probably accelerated situation. Cool. I would meet you in the middle there. But what I can't accept is just putting this whole thing on him but ignoring the part of him putting drugs in his system, which we know. Okay, you can. I mean, yeah, he probably had less fentanyl than probably the average person, for DUI, but it can still with that drug and the combination of everything going on, and he being stressed is that can be accumulated together. But before that, before he was even claiming he wasn't breathing before he was even put on the ground.
Okay.
So again, when you look at the video is in entirety, he was saying he had trouble breathing before he can put on the ground. So again, I can't paint the whole thing on Chauvin.
Okay.
So because he made that claim before then.
So just to be clear, let's go ahead and read on the autopsy that you're talking about. I can read it with you, okay? On the very first page at the very top, the guy, Andrew Baker, gives the reason, and I'm going to read it to you. Cardiopulmonary arrest, which is another way, like thing for like a heart attack or, whatever.
Okay.
Complicating law enforcement subdual, restraint, and neck compression. If the other things were the cause of the death, then they would include that in there. If it was additionally complicated such that it was a relevant factor for why he died, it would be listed at the top here, but it's not. They only mention the law enforcement, subdual restraint, and the neck compression. And then they mentioned that what that caused was obviously the cardiopulmonary arrest. So he had a heart attack due to the neck compression. That's what the autopsy is saying. Now you can look at
Okay.
any of these other red herrings that Candace Owens is throwing out there and saying, well, drug use or any of those things. And sure, they do mention they did a toxicology report, and in the toxicology report, they do mention those things, which is also how they came to the conclusion that there was hypertension and all those things. Note, they didn't list any of those things as the cause of his death. So in that case, simply saying that there was no blunt force, you don't need blunt force in order to compress someone's neck. That's not what's required. And so all of these things are really right here in the very first thing: cardiopulmonary arrest, complicating law enforcement, subdual restraint, and neck compression. If that's what he's stating, then I think it's fair to say that, again, the guy whose job it is, who is a ward of the state, who he works for the state, and his job is to determine the cause, he determined in his own autopsy that you're reading right now with your own eyes that it was a heart attack caused by the officers. Why are we jumping to drug use as if that's related when the guy whose job it is, who is a medical professional, isn't doing that?
Well, see, okay, this is where well, based on what you said, I believe you're being disingenuous because you just said it was a heart attack, and I pointed out that the drugs enlarged his heart. So already off rip, his heart was already enlarged before he was even, before that the Chauvin neck was on. So if you still want to say anything about the heart, I mentioned the heart, which the drugs had played a result in. So again, if you want to say Chauvin and accelerate it, okay, I can meet you there. But to say the only thing or show was the sole reason of that, that's not the case.
But the autopsy doesn't say, listen, if the heart enlargement had part of what caused his death, then the autopsy report would say it. But unfortunately, in the case title, it's not there. So again, listen,
Okay.
I'm not being disingenuous. I'll never be intentionally dishonest in a conversation. I'm not personally invested in that way, okay? So I want you
Okay.
to understand I'm
Okay.
going to be as fair and honest as I possibly can be. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong, okay? It's just that simple. But I'm saying I mentioned the enlarged heart and didn't specifically address, I mentioned the cardiopulmonary arrest and didn't mention the enlarged heart because Andrew Baker, the pathologist, he didn't. You see the case title at the very top, the very top. If the enlarged heart was part of the cause, he would say so, but he did not.
Okay. So all right. So and okay. Then another point. So how long did they say Chauvin had his knee? What they say? What, 8 minutes?
I think people generally paraphrase that it was 8 minutes because of the idea that's the length of the video. But there was
Right.
definite movement between those things, and he like repositioned himself and things like that. So there might have been times
Right.
where it was on his shoulders and things like that.
Okay. Okay. So and that's fair. So this is well. Let me say this because maybe you can. Well, I'm gonna say because maybe you can kind of understand better where I'm coming from. Now, I personally believe like just that there was it was due to an agenda. The reason why the doctor may have wrote it the way he did, but I can't. This I'm just pointing out my personal opinion. I can't prove that. But with that being said, throughout the entire video, like you said, is he moved around. It wasn't just stationary the whole time. For somebody to take for somebody to take their breath, you have to really put strain on that. And you have to take 8 minutes. You can kill somebody way sooner than that if you put enough force on somebody's neck. It's really hard for me to believe that somebody's knee, was going back and forth to somebody's neck, and that type of it didn't look like that type of pressure was even put on there. So based on that, yes, I believe it was written that way to make it seem like it was all Chauvin. Can I prove that? No. So I want to put that out there. So, but with that being said, it doesn't make sense for somebody to have their knee, going from a knee to the back for almost 8 minutes, and then they die. If that was truly the case, they would have died a lot sooner than that. And then you would also see the force of that knee. So that's what I'm
Not
saying.
not necessarily. Okay, for one, here I sent you an image so you can see that the knee is very clearly on the neck. Okay, I sent that
Okay.
to you on Facebook. I'll link it to my stream as well.
Okay.
Okay,
Okay, yes. That
but but just to be clear, listen, the way when it comes to lack of oxygen, it doesn't have to be all, like immediate. For example, if you squeeze someone's neck and just cut off like pretty much all oxygen, then yeah, they're gonna pass out probably within 15 seconds. It'll be really, really quick, okay? But then if
okay.
you just limit and compress to where they're not losing all oxygen, but say they're only receiving 20% of what's required, then it's a slow, slow death. And so then at that point, while they're already feeling the lack of ability to breathe and things like that, and it's starting to impact them, it's not to the point where they literally can't breathe. Like you've probably experienced this to some degree, when like maybe you know how like if you put like heavy blankets and things over your body while you're in a bed, you start feeling like
Mm-hmm.
that lack of oxygen. That doesn't mean you're not receiving any. It just starts you're
Okay.
receiving a little bit less and less and less. Now, obviously, that's an example, but there can be
Right.
more
No.
extreme forms of this example, such as a knee to the neck, where it's not enough to immediately restrict your ability to talk, not enough to restrict your ability to even take a deep breath, but it requires so much effort and things like that, and the amount of oxygen you're getting is depleting, and such that eventually your heart won't continue to keep up, which is what they are saying happened, which is why they said cardiopulmonary arrest, subdual restraint. That's why they said that, because it's not just the thing like just an immediate compression that immediately knocks you out. It's just enough that your heart eventually can't keep up.
Okay, but okay, fair. But how does that explain him already admitted he couldn't breathe before prior to even getting on the ground? Who's to say that's not even prior to him being on the ground saying he couldn't breathe or had harder breathing versus how who's to say that's not even being connected? You know how it go from okay I can't breathe and then also I'm on the ground and it's Chauvin the reason why I can't breathe. How do you explain that?
To be honest with you, I don't have a perfect explanation for that. But what I can say is from the witnesses who were recording the video, they recognized outside, not touching Chauvin, hey, you're killing him. They called this out over time. Chauvin did say multiple times he can't breathe. And now, maybe I can give you, maybe he was hyperventilating from the stress of being whatever. And so then that was causing him of lack of oxygen, like from the hyperventilation. You understand? Like when obviously, like whenever we're stressed, cortisol releases in our brain, which literally triggers
Right.
us to start doing shallow breathing and
Well,
things like that.
well,
Hold on, let me
right,
finish, please. Let me finish. So then I
right.
get that. And so maybe I feel like that's still a non sequitur because again, if that was the case, and maybe because of the stress and the like, and just how intense that situation is, he's like feeling shortness of breath. Like I get that. But then once you put the knee on someone's neck and the compression is happening, such that a coroner himself says it, then I feel like at that point, these two things are disconnected. And lastly, I want to say, you mentioned that you feel like it was politically motivated. You have to understand this was the catalyst of all the civil unrest. This is what caused it. So the idea that the coroner was immediately like predisposed to the understanding of the gravity of how this would impact the country when he wrote his autopsy sounds a little bit unfounded. I would think maybe I could see if you said, okay, an independent one, post riots, et cetera, maybe you could say that one's politically motivated. But you have to understand this is the one that's appointed by the state, not the family's independent one. The one appointed by the state who has had this job for God knows how long and has worked with police departments and worked with everyone for all of these cases for years. To call that person compromised, if you can't trust his word, I don't know whose word you can.
I mean, okay, I hear you. So first, well, before I get into it, let me ask you: do you believe it's impossible? Do you think it's impossible that it could have been politically motivated?
Of course, I would never say it's impossible.
Okay,
That's
okay,
unfounded.
okay,
Yeah,
okay, okay. I just wanted to make sure you at least can admit that. So,
of
all right,
course.
all right. So, with that being said, reason you said this was the catalyst, or that was the catalyst. Is that correct?
I did.
Well, and when you, what do you mean by that? Catalyst for what?
For the insane unrest that that happened, that where everyone kind of went, where everyone where everyone went kind of crazy over the situation, and like for over the next like 3 days or to a week, we saw a ramping up of like insane amounts of riots and things like that. But I want to point out to you though that the autopsy was done literally the very next morning at 9 a.m. we're looking at the autopsy results, right? So
Right.
we had his
Right.
date and hour of death at 5:25:20 and 9:25 p.m. And then we have the date and hour of the autopsy at 5:26:20, 9:25 a.m. So it's about 12 hours after the event happened. No one can understand the gravity of how that George Floyd death would have impacted us. So the idea that he would have been compromised and politically motivated by some crazy galvanization of the entire country, I dare say the world, that's like all rioting
Mhm.
and things like that, seems unfounded considering this is within 12 hours and the riots and everything didn't spread. It took a while for social media to spread everything and for it to become as big of a force as it was. And again, this is a state person whose job it is to report this information. And I would imagine that his goal, if possible, would be to go and try to say, hey, wait a minute, no, this had nothing to do with the officer and more so to do with whatever, because of how those people work in proximity at times.
Well, that's what I'm saying. That it makes perfect sense for him to say that because of the climate that's going on. Because, like I said, it's not even mentioning the fact that he had trouble breathing before, or whatever. It's solely talking about that situation where Chauvin was on there. Chauvin was knee was on his back. So, and I know you said you couldn't really explain the disconnect there, but it doesn't make sense for him to make that statement, and then 5 minutes later, or wherever, how much time, 10 minutes, 15 minutes later, it's a totally different situation on why he couldn't breathe. To me, it makes more sense that there's a consistent condition between he first made that statement until his him to his passing. I don't see the disc. I don't see where something could be different, especially based on the fact that well, I know you said that it don't necessarily have to be extreme force on there, but like that's why I said I can meet you in the middle and say, hey, Chauvin play could have accelerated. I'm not trying to deny that. I just think where we disconnect is I can't put this all on Chauvin. And I know the main topic was Candace's line. So I don't I don't think if you're going directly about what the coroner said, I can see why you say she lied, but it wasn't a lie that he did have drugs in his system. That's not a lie.
No,
So
but if that was the only thing that Candace said, I would not be calling her a liar here, because the truth is, as the
okay,
toxicology report said, he did have drugs in his system. Not a lethal amount, not what's uncommon for a person to have in their body and still be a functional person. Like maybe like DUI, obviously, but still not like it be a
right,
lethal amount. 11 nanograms is not a lethal amount in that regard. Furthermore, I want to point out to
right.
you that yet again, like I showed you a picture of the knee on his neck. Candace Owen said his knee wasn't on his neck, it was on his back. Look at the image that I sent you, and you tell me, is that knee on his back or on his neck?
Okay. No. In that specific picture you sent is on his neck. So, but this is where the full video comes into play, because in the full video, yeah, you can snapshot, and yes, that does appears to be the case. But again, there are also snapshots of his knee being on his back. So we can both can agree. Okay, his knee wasn't in one spot for the entirety of the video. I
Sure.
think we both can. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely. So then if
Okay.
that's the case, then we might be able to say his knee was on his neck for part of the video, and it doesn't need very, very long time in order for him to have been killed. And I'm sorry, it doesn't need to be on his neck the entire time in order for it to cause cardiopulmonary arrest, complicating law enforcement subdual restraint and neck compression, right? So even if it wasn't there the entire time, that actually works against you, because remember, your earlier argument was if it was on the entire time, it wouldn't take that long. And so it's like, sure,
All
maybe
right.
it wasn't the entire time. You're saying it should be a pretty short time. So maybe his knee was only on his neck for 2 of the minutes. That's enough to murder someone. And we have an image
Uh,
of the knee on the
well,
neck.
okay. Okay, if that was to be true, that means he would have been murdered 2 minutes after, because his knee being on his neck instead of being moved. So now you're saying, okay, if it moved from his neck, are you saying that would expand his time to get that gave him more time to live? Is that what you're saying?
Sure, what I would say is if, for example, he originally subdued him and say maybe he put his knee on his neck for about 30 seconds and then he repositioned himself and so on and so forth. And so the knee was moving in various locations, but during the final 2 minutes that where he died or whatever, then during that time, the knee was on the neck enough to cause an immediate like compression enough to cause him to die, right? So like, I don't know
Okay.
exactly when the timeline happened. What I do know is one, the autopsy was able to reveal that the neck compression caused him to have the heart attack. That's one. Two, what I also know is we do have images that demonstrate he was very obviously on his neck. And that does not look like the lightweight compression that you were talking about earlier. That looks like enough to kill a man. Three, we again with the autopsy and the imagery for Candace to make the statement his knee wasn't on his neck is a lie.
Okay, and when it comes to situations like this, I think people get so stuck on the words. Oh, so yes, it's both of yes. In that specific moment, he had his knee over his neck, and in the video, you can also see the other officer kind of telling him like, okay, no reposition, whatever. That's when he repositioned. So I, I don't, I'm not giving too much stock into words and saying, okay, knee on the neck to be say, okay, oh, well, she's a liar. I don't necessarily think that's, you can say that. I mean, somebody can, perceive something and say something one way. Don't necessarily mean they're a liar.
Well, let me
So
explain. Can I address that part really quick?
okay, go ahead.
This is why I would say that she's a liar. Because if it was just something that she saw in passing, I wouldn't call you a liar because I believe that you took the information that was granted to you and that's what you believed. And you believed based
Okay.
off of her documentary. I don't know if you saw that documentary, but that's what she
Yeah,
indicated. Okay, then that's exactly what I would have thought. You believed based off of her documentary and the images that she selected within that documentary that he wasn't really on his neck. Kanye walked away with that same statement after having watched Candace Owens' documentary. But the problem is, after that, when you have people like myself, when Candace Owens posted the image saying he wasn't on his neck and showed a different image, I responded with an actual image of the knee on his neck and directly to her and said, now, you tell me that the knee is not on the neck, or are you going to continue your lie? You could easily fix this right now, or you'll continue to spread the misinformation, and you and I both know what she's going to do. So once it gets to the point where you have the information and you still maintain that, it becomes a lie. You, in this conversation thus far, already walked it back and said, yes, his knee was on his neck. In the beginning of this conversation, you said it wasn't, it was more on his lower back. Just from you getting the picture evidence, you've been willing to be honest enough to admit it. That's the difference between you and her. She's a liar who, even when confronted with the information, and you know that she saw all of that information because she made a freaking documentary on it where she studied it painstakingly. So having that information and still maintaining this erroneous position, which even you have walked back after a single image, and the fact that to pretend that she hasn't gotten those images enough to straighten her narrative, that's dishonest. She's a liar.
Okay, again, this is where I disagree with you because the actual argument was that he held his knee on his neck for 8 minutes.
I
That's what
never made
Candace
that
was.
argument.
Oh, no. I'm not saying you. I'm saying the actual argument at the time, or what Candace was actually responding to, because that's what people were saying. His knee, Chauvin knee was on his neck for 8 minutes. That's mostly what Candace was responding to.
But
I
that's
don't
not
think
what
she
she
was just
said.
saying, no, hold on. No. If you read that, no, that's what I'm saying. That's what people were saying. She was just responding to what people were saying. So she's not saying that, or I highly doubt that she's saying at no point, or she was denied at any point that the knee may have been on his neck.
She did.
But to say he was on the knee, it's in the document. That's not what she's saying.
She said that his knee wasn't
just
on his neck; it was on his lower back.
right for majority of the time.
She never said for the majority of the time, or said, "Oh, it wasn't on it for the entire minute." She never said any of that. She just said his knee wasn't on his neck. Is what she said. That's a lie.
If you look at the video, you will see that though. That's what I'm saying.
Wait, if I look at the video, I'll see what? That his knee wasn't on his neck, because I will see that his knee was on his neck at certain parts of the time.
Right, certain parts. So what I'm saying is,
she didn't say certain parts. She just said his knee wasn't on his neck.
Okay. Does she? Okay, let me rephrase this then. Does she really have to say that if people are saying their knee is been on his neck for eight minutes, when she just responded to people saying the knee is on the neck for 8 minutes?
Listen, if she responds to the lie or the miscommunication that his knee was on his neck for 8 minutes with another lie, his knee was never on his neck, then now we have a problem. What you can say is his knee wasn't on the neck for the entirety of that 8 minutes. You can make that statement. But if you make that statement, you and I both know, then you'll get the pushback. It doesn't have to be for the entirety of the 8 minutes. It can only be for 2 minutes, and that's enough to be lethal. That's why she wouldn't state that.
Okay.
That's why she would be as dishonest as she was.
See, but this is again, this is where I'm not understanding your argument. You saying if it was on there for 2 minutes, that would have been lethal. Lethal. Was his knee on his neck for 2 minutes? Are you? Was that the case?
I don't know the entire length of time that his knee was on his neck. I just know that his knee was on his neck long enough to call cardiopulmonary arrest, complicating law enforcement subdual, restraint, and neck compression. That's what
that's
I know.
what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. How can they make that the conclusion when the whole video, where most of the video was his knee wasn't on his neck? Most of the video was on the back.
They make the
and
conclusion.
That was after.
They make the conclusion based off of studying the body. Even absent a video, they can still study the body and discover the cause of death. This has nothing to do with the video. It has nothing to do with any of that. They study the physical body and look for signs of compression and things like that in order to make this conclusion. That's why they said it.
But this is why I'm saying it's bogus, because this is what I'm saying. If you're telling me that this is the reason why he died, because of compression on the neck, but when I'm watching the video, the knee was on his neck look for less than 2 minutes. We don't know, but less than 2 minutes.
But then the rest of
okay, but that's what I'm saying. Even if it's more than 2 minutes, he still didn't die at that time. Chauvin still had plenty of time to readjust his knee. So basically what I'm saying is for that to even make sense, he had to have died before he even repositioned his knee. For that to even make sense to me. That's what I'm saying.
And he very much could have, because at some of the time, while he was repositioning, Chauvin was unresponsive. Chauvin became unresponsive very long before the end of the video.
Okay.
So then that means he could have
been George Floyd.
I'm sorry, yeah, George Floyd. George Floyd became unresponsive long before the end of that video. So then that means he could have died probably at 5 minutes into the engagement. We have no idea, but we don't have to know the very specific moment he died within that 8-minute altercation. What we do know is that neck compression was the cause of death and that it happened sometime during that 8-minute altercation.
All right. So let me ask you this then. Have you not seen a police officer restrain somebody by putting a knee on the back before?
On the back? Sure. I think you could see. Yes, I have.
Okay. So do you believe that, let's say George Floyd didn't have drugs? Now, let's say it's the same situation. Do you believe that his chance of dying still the same, or is it less?
If it wasn't on his neck?
If he didn't, I'm saying, let's say the whole situation played out the same, but he didn't have drugs in his system. Do you believe his chances of dying is still the same, or is less?
Well, listen, according to the autopsy, based off of what I now know on the autopsy, I would say his chances were the same. Unless you can point out to me an area where the autopsy, because again, if this was an additional complication caused by the drugs in the system, it would be there. But unfortunately, that's not what Andrew Baker stated.
So you don't think an enlarged heart is a complication?
I think an enlarged heart can be a complication, but hold on. But it's not necessarily, because again,
you're being disingenuous.
I'm not being disingenuous. There's a coroner whose job it is. A pathologist whose job it is to determine this. I'm not a medical expert, so yes, just on its face, at a surface level, yes, I would say that it sounds like something that could happen. But if a pathologist, a guy who's gone to medical school, been in school for 12 years, has done thousands of autopsies, has seen God knows how many different bodies, and is able to look at this thing and he doesn't say it, then I'm going to trust him. I'm not smarter than the pathologist. My common sense doesn't make more sense than the refined knowledge to be an expert pathologist. That's what this guy is. So I don't know more than him.
No. But that's how people can. But see, that very reason is how people get lied to, because you're so caught up in the credentials that you're overlooking common sense. I don't have to have somebody who went to school for this to see what common sense is. Common sense tell me if I'm on drugs and my heart is enlarged, right? And I'm in a stressful situation, that's going to play a part in it. I'm not separating the two. I would actually admit both played a part in it. That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
I'm not trying to excuse Chauvin. And I'm also not even trying to say it's all the drugs. But what I'm saying is I don't care who you are, if you or what credentials you have. If I'm sitting here looking at a situation where somebody is drugs and have a large heart, and then then you add the fact that somebody knees on somebody back in a stressful situation, it's not hard to believe somebody could pass from that. It's not hard to believe that. So again, as far as Candace want to put it all on drugs, okay, I'm not gonna go as far as to say that. No, I ain't gonna do that. But I think I think what most common, or I think what's most reasonable is both played a factor into it.
Okay.
I think that's yeah.
Sure. Listen, and maybe both. If you want to go with both played a part in it, then that would still make Derek Chauvin a murderer.
I mean, right. I'm not against, like I said, I believe what he did was stupid. He shouldn't have did that. And I have no, I have no issue with him, being in jail with us. So I have no issue with that.
Okay.
So, but
At least
okay.
we
So
found some middle ground. So then
okay.
the next topic, right?
Right.
If I'd rather this. Let's go ahead and both get our final words on that. What I'm going to say at the end of the day is there's an autopsy for a reason. And the autopsy clearly states what the cause is. And for us to just assume that there must be an additional cause, I think is unfounded. Lastly, the idea that political pressure motivated this thing when it happened and when the autopsy was completed in less than 12 hours after the incident occurred, before there was worldwide spread information, because obviously you understand that information takes a while to travel on social media and things like that. So before we had all of the information, the idea that this medical guy who works for the freaking state, right, the county's medical examiner, like he was compromised and decided to be politically motivated when that wasn't even the climate yet. The climate didn't become crazy until after George Floyd. So that just seems completely unfounded. Lastly, the main point behind this conversation was about Candace Owens lying and stating that his knee wasn't on his neck. Had she made a more reserved statement, something more like his knee wasn't on the neck for the entire time, then maybe we wouldn't be having this argument. But to lie and say his knee wasn't on his neck and to say it was only on his lower back, as you also stated earlier, as you walked away with that conclusion from the documentary, when I've now shown you images, and if I was to show you videos, we could see that his knee was on that neck for quite some time during this video. I think at that point that we would not be even then we wouldn't even be having a conversation about her being a liar. You can please have the final word on that, on everything.
No, yeah. Oh yeah. So thanks for, but yeah, I don't think it's so much as lying. Maybe she misspoke or more so misspoke. That's not lying to me, because how I look at it is, okay, we look at the video, which so yes, in part of the video, his knee was positioned on his neck. But I will argue majority of the time when Chauvin was on top of him, that his knee was not on his neck. His knee was on more of an upper back. So I believe that's more so what she was referring to. So it's just when it's just the word liar is like, what's the lie about? I mean, because we can easily go back to the video and see the video, and see that part where the knee is on his neck. I don't think she just literally I think she was more so just responding to the argument, or most people argument, that he had his knee on his neck for 8 minutes. That's my honest belief. But again, like I said, we can, like I said, we can kind of stop it there with it. Like I said, I do like that we found some middle ground. I want to just keep it on that good note.
100%. Thank you for that. Now, the next thing that she talks about frequently is she always mentions that Black people have a victim mentality, which indicates obviously that we're not victims in any form of systemic oppression. You responded to that and made.
I'm sorry. Say that one. Say that one. I'm sorry. Say that one more time. My headphone was going in and out.
No problem. She says also that Black people suffer from victimhood mentality, which I believe is indicative of the idea that we are not victims at all of systemic oppression anymore. That's what it sounds like she's saying on a regular basis, and I disagree with that. And then you responded when I pointed that part out and said that there is no system in the country that holds back your success as a Black man, right?
Yes.
Okay. And so my argument against that is, I think, one, Obviously, whenever we start talking about systems, the purpose of examining systems is to determine normative outcomes. In other words, it's to determine how the average person is going to respond given this system. But to point out an outlier, somebody who goes above and beyond to
Oh,
succeed.
can
Go
you
ahead.
give me an example? Because can you give me an example? Because I'm not really following what you
I,
mean by that.
well, okay. So, example, I'll give you an analogy. Say we're
Okay.
having everyone race, okay, but we have a system
Okay.
that says, just hypothetically, we're doing 100-yard dash, and we're saying all black people have to start at 90. Start an additional 10 yards away. Okay, if
Okay.
someone was
All
to
right.
succeed and win that race, that doesn't mean that the system isn't designed to make black people less successful. It means that this guy went above and beyond in order to succeed. Likewise, pointing out individuals who have succeeded in this country where there has been insane amounts of economic deprivation and economic attacks on black Americans is I think it ignores the system, which again the whole purpose is to like look at expected outcomes given these circumstances.
Okay. So, all right. Well, how about I just say my stance then, or what I think of it. So, this when I hear systematic systems, um, I think about something that prevents most, if not most, all of a race. Okay. So, meaning just because let me rephrase that. So I think it's systematic. When I think of systematic, I look at preventing a race from educating themselves, preventing a race from building a family, um, or or intentionally holding down a particular race of people. Okay,
Okay.
so that was done from 1619 to 1865. And then after that, you had segregation, which I will argue wasn't horrible or preventing black people. We just kept it segregated. Maybe some stuff was like the equipment that we use probably was secondhand, things like that, but we still made do. So, but with that, but like I said, if but let's even if you want to count that, okay, I give you that. So anything, pretty much anything after the '60s, I can't say is systematic racism because for one, we're black people are the most freest. Ever since then, we have made more money. We had the most black people that this country had the most black people millionaire or making money in general. We have our choices to do whatever we want to do. See, to me, the thing is, it's not systematic racism. It's our choices that puts us back. Because there's no system. There was no system that put me in jail. I'd never been to jail because I obeyed the law. Well, when I was in school, I did my schoolwork. I was able to get to college. I had a whole scholarship. I didn't skip school. I didn't, I didn't gangbang. I grew up in Memphis. I didn't gangbang. So, with that being said, it was the choice. My mom taught. I kept Christ first. My mom raised me in the church. Kept Christ first. It was all how my mom raised me and the choices I made as an adult. That I didn't get in trouble with the police. I didn't. I don't have any baby mamas. I don't. I'm engaged. So all my choices put me in a situation where I'm able to succeed. In most cases, where people are calling systematic racism are basically black people making poor choices. So that's my stance on that. If you want to, hello, are you still there?
Still, sorry about that. Thank you for sharing all that. We got to go through a lot of
Hold
it.
on. Oh,
Oh, can you not hear me?
okay, my bad. Okay. Yeah, I can hear you. My bad. If I went to a little long-winded.
No, no, no. It's totally okay. It was like an opening statement, so I expect you to try to get like the breadth of what you're thinking out there. It's totally fine. We're gonna have to probably break it down while I'm trying to address each thing, right? So I did take notes. One of the things you were saying that you felt like segregation wasn't that bad, and that yes, maybe we didn't have access to everything, but we still made do. I would say
Okay.
that one of the biggest harms from segregation was the things that it impacted. Because segregation in and of itself is just whatever. But when we start looking at what was segregated, well, when schools are segregated, I'm sure you're aware, education is one of the largest determining factors for like success in this country. Secondly, when jobs are segregated, and so then now you're not allowed to like work good, high-paying jobs because of the color of your skin, regardless of your merit or intelligence or anything, then that obviously is going to impact your lifetime earnings, your satisfaction with your employment, and things like that. Then, of course, the most important, if we're going to talk about economics, is housing. When segregation in housing only allows black people to buy homes in dilapidated neighborhoods or that don't acquire as much value over time, then that's going to have a really negative impact on your long-term wealth. So I would say segregation was particularly bad for black people, and I think when we look at it, we can look at how that impacts black people living today. The example that I typically give is that of my mother. So my mother was born in South Los Angeles back when my grandmother bought the house that that my mother was raised in. She bought that house in South Los Angeles because you were not allowed to live in West Hills or any of the other white areas. So this area was kind of restricted for black people. Her house matured at a rate that was still ridiculous over all that time. It went from, I believe, somewhere around $50,000 to like $500,000. Okay. But people who bought homes in the white neighborhoods in the exact same place, at the exact same time, those homes matured to the tune of $2.5 million. So then when my grandmother passed 4 years ago, she left an inheritance to my mother. That inheritance was going to be impacted by the systemic oppression and the loss of maturation that's caused by purchasing a home during that segregated time, because homes purchased in black neighborhoods did not appreciate the same way. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. I hear what you're saying.
So then my mother
So,
would be able to say that
okay,
her,
go ahead.
so just making sure. So then my mother would be able to safely say that systemic oppression impacted her 4 years ago because of that housing, right?
I see your point. Yeah.
And okay, now we can broaden that. We can look at all of the homes and things that Caucasians were able to purchase because when we went through the Depression and things like that, and when there was a New Deal, in order to try to help people become more financially stable, the government took on multiple things: education, jobs, mortgages, which was housing. And they did all of those things through the FHA department. They had specific job trainings departments and things like that in order to help Americans get ahead, because that's what's obviously necessary in order to do that. Well, when they did all of these things, they limited to white people. So then that means black people weren't earning homes during all of those years. That means all of those generations
Oh, I'm
weren't
sorry.
earning the
Say
equity
that
and
one more time.
stuff.
Kind of. I can't. No, I'm sorry. Kind of go back a little bit. What's the point you're making? I kind of got lost a little bit.
I feel like actually I'm going on kind of long. I'd rather you respond to the thing that I said so far.
Oh, okay. You sure?
Sure.
No, no. It's because I know you were saying some. I know you said some that the wealth of your mom was she didn't really. You saying she wasn't able to get the full amount for the house, basically.
Right, because if it had been in a white
Okay.
neighborhood, then that means that the house would have been worth around $2.5 million. We're in California, in Los Angeles,
Okay,
and
so
so,
so
but
are you
my
saying it's the same neighborhood or this is a two different neighborhoods? Is that what you're saying? Like,
I'm saying white neighborhoods were matured to $2.5 million. Black neighborhoods were only matured to $500,000, and black people weren't
okay,
allowed to buy homes in the white neighborhoods at the time that my grandmother purchased her home.
okay, gotcha. All right. So, well, first off, what I'm gonna say is that when you're appraising something, the community also matters. Okay,
Hmm.
not just that home. So, and now I can't. I wasn't around. To be honest, I would assume black people kept up. Yeah, I ain't gonna say I assume. I'll probably go as far as say I know more black people kept up their communities than we do now. So even let's say what you said is true. Or I ain't gonna say let's say. I'll accept that. Okay. So reason why that's not. I don't necessarily view that as oppression is because, for one, they would get a house, for one, and you could pass it down to your family. To me, that's more valuable, really, than trying to sell it. So that's one. But two, I think we have to ask ourselves, what are our values? Okay. So our values used to be God, family, and business, right? Or country, country and business, or whatever the case may be. But it was still God and family first. Okay. So when we was segregated, or when it was segregated, Black people were married at an 80% rate. We was very self-sufficient in entrepreneurship and businesses, and a good and our money circulated in our community. The end of segregation. After segregation, that's when our marriage rate dropped, single parenthood went up. Excuse me. Government assistance, and that's when the our and killing our community went up. Is so to me, I don't. Again, it's not a racial suppression thing. We fell into the traps of I'm gonna get I guess I'll get a little political, but I just believe it plays a part. Black people fell into the Democratic trap after segregation. So reason why I say that. So even if you want to say there's any type of racial suppression or racial oppression, it comes from the Democratic Party, which we were tricked and voted for them. So any racial oppression that even happened is them to blame, if anything.
Wait, sir.
So, and
But,
this is
but you're not addressing any of the
go
things
ahead.
that I said, though.
What you said that? No, I did address. I said you said the appreciation wasn't as much as that. I said that don't really matter to me, or I don't view that as oppression of Black people, because for one, the value was, do we have a roof over our head? Your grandma had a roof over her head, and she was able to pass it down to your mom.
Okay,
To me, that's more important.
okay. So then let's address that, though, then,
Hold on.
because you're going into the
Okay, I'm
Democrat
sorry.
Party, and that's a whole nother conversation. Like, I wanted to focus
Okay,
on the housing,
okay.
because you still mentioned things
Well,
about jail and college and keeping Christ first, and there's a whole bunch, and our choices. Those are whole other conversations that you said in your initial statement. I don't want to now introduce another one with the Democrat Party. I want to address them one by one.
Okay, that's fair. I stick to that. So let's stick to the houses. All right.
Right.
The important part is having a roof over your head. When we were slaves, we couldn't buy our homes. Okay. So now we're able to buy a home. Now, that's important, because what does it matter what is appraised for, or what you can sell for it? Shouldn't it be more important to have a home in the family and be able to pass it down? Should that be more important?
Well, I don't know about more important, but what I can say is, obviously, yes, having a roof over your head is a very important thing. The problem is the roof over your head also functions as an economic vehicle in this capitalist country. So then, if that's the case, if white
Well, it
people,
can be. It don't have to be.
it is, and 70% of wealth portfolios in this country, real estate is how they do it. The vast majority of wealth in this country is generated from real estate. So the wealth is generated from real estate, and the wealth portfolios are comprised of real estate. So it does function as that, and it also serves other functions. Real
Okay.
estate taxes are how the states pay for education, which is why you're zoned when
Right.
you live in an area.
Right.
Your property taxes then go and pay for the education for the school. That's where they get their money. So then, if
Right.
that's the case, now this becomes the places and the homes you purchase are not just roofs over your head. They are also economic vehicles. They are also educational vehicles. And they also have to deal with where you can work, because typically people live within proximity of good
Okay.
jobs.
Hold on. I think I'm lost now, because a Black person can't buy a house in a white neighborhood today.
Wait, hold on. Well, a black person can buy one in a white neighborhood
Right.
today. Hold on. What I was saying was originally that at the
No.
time,
See,
wait,
but hold on. But the argument was about victim mentality today.
right. And as I was explaining to you, if you let me finish, I promise you, I'm not just going to ramble about the old times. What I was pointing out to you was that my grandmother purchased a home that could only be purchased in a black neighborhood, and then that neighborhood, that home appreciated at a lower value, meaning it was not the same economic vehicle that that home would have been for a white person in a white neighborhood, which means that the inheritance that was left to my mother when my grandmother passed in December in 2019, that inheritance was directly impacted by that. That's what I'm saying.
But how is
20
that racial? But
20 oh
this
yeah,
is
here's how it's racial. It's racial because they only didn't let black people buy those homes in white neighborhoods. So the only reason why my mother's inheritance was as paltry as it was, considering her mother and father were homeowners, is because they were black. Because if they were white, they would have lived in a white neighborhood with the exact same investment, which means the house would have appreciated at 5 times that value, which means that the inheritance left to my mother would have been 5 times higher.
but we
All
just
because she
but
was
we
black.
but we just we both agree that it's not just the house, it's also the community. There was it's in white communities, they just simply had it was simply um it was bigger homes, it was more businesses. It just simply just they just had more. So
What
it's
composes
not it's
community? What causes the community is made up of people, and the
right.
people were forced into these circumstances.
Well,
If
hold on.
black
What do you mean
people,
force? What do
well,
you mean
let me
force?
explain. If I'm needing to provide, as you already admitted, that the roof over your head is rather important, so then that means I'm going to try to do that. I want to buy a home.
Right.
I want the American dream, and I want my children to be protected and not necessarily having to live in the inner city in projects or apartments or things like that. Whatever we can do to try to achieve the American dream. So then at this point, I'm going to look for whatever the best opportunities I can. But if you
Right.
remove my ability to live in white neighborhoods, but I still want a home, not an apartment, I want a home, my own property. If I want that, then I can only buy those in black neighborhoods. So once I'm limited from buying them in Caucasian neighborhoods, that's going to be the community. The community is going to be made up of people who are going to be limited in their experiences, limited in their employment, limited in their education, limited in the amount of money that their property values are going to pay for, limited in their attendance of college, limited in all of these factors, limited in their proximity towards job and industrial centers. This is what the black neighborhoods were. So that's what created the community. That's still politically caused.
No, but that's what I'm saying. Before the '60s, black people were married at a higher rate. There was low crime rate, and black businesses were the all time high. So again, what do you mean by limited? Kids were graduating. So what do you mean by limited?
Black poverty still was ridiculously high prior to the 60s.
No,
The wealth
no, no, no,
gap,
no, no.
the wealth gap in this country,
Black poverty is higher today than it was before the '60s.
the wealth gap was still insane in the country at the time, right?
But why does it matter?
Well, because if the reason for the wealth gap is because of systemic injustice, and wealth is what
No,
determines,
no, no, no,
hold
no,
on,
no. That's not
let,
that's not that's not systemic
well, it
injustice. I
was
know.
because
No, it's not.
there was literal legal segregation on what jobs you could go to. There was legal segregation at the time on what schools you were allowed to attend. Black people weren't even allowed to attend the universities before we ended up getting civil rights acts passed. So the
But
idea that there wasn't any of the economic impact wasn't caused by systems is just
no, no,
not
no,
true.
no. What's the issue? What was the issue? You're just saying just because we wasn't allowed in white folks stuff doesn't mean that's an issue.
Well, sure.
What's the issue?
Okay, let me explain to you why it's an issue. That is the issue. The issue is,
Why?
let me explain to you. I'm trying to. The issue is education is what determines financial prospects and employment. So, for instance, educated people make more than their non-educated counterparts. So then that means
So now you're saying black people were uneducated then?
I'm
Is that
saying
what you're trying to say?
I'm saying that black people were not allowed to attend universities. And yes, and I'm saying that there was an obvious difference in the educational standards, which is why we needed Brown versus Board of Education, because there was a there was a clear difference in in the quality of their education. So yes, that educational quality difference definitely impacted the financial
What?
aspects of those
No.
people, as education is one of the three largest factors in determining
If that was
financial
true,
income.
if that was true, how did our education dip after civil rights? How did it dip after it? When we integrated, how did it dip? If that's true,
Can you show me any numbers that shows that our education
whoa,
dipped from civil rights? Because I don't know that.
yes, you can. Yes, you can look it up. Our black kids are not reading on par. Their grade level.
Are you saying that the literacy rates were lower before the Civil Rights Act? Because you understand that there were plenty of
No,
black.
no, 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 no,
Oh,
no.
okay.
No,
So then our
I'm
education
saying it's
did
not. No,
improve after the
no, no,
Civil
no,
Rights Act, after
no, 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 no,
integration.
no, 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 no. You not. No, no. I'm saying the opposite. I said it was higher prior.
Okay, and so that's what the question I was asking to make sure. So I just want to make sure
Okay.
we're clear. You're saying
Yeah.
prior to the passing of Brown versus Board of Education, in which we had integrations in school, you're saying literacy for black people was illiteracy, excuse me, for black people was higher prior to integration. Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm saying illiteracy was higher after integration.
Okay, then let me just look that up right now.
Okay.
There's no way. Okay, here we are, race and schooling in the South. Okay, here, man, yeah, that was just wrong. Wait, let me just make sure I see which part I was reading. Postbellum, there we go. Postbellum decline. Control F. Postbellum decline. All right, here, I'm gonna read this to you, okay? By 1900, slightly more than half of Southern blacks claimed to be literate, a remarkable achievement in light of conditions a generation earlier. The postbellum decline in literacy was larger among blacks than whites. Nevertheless, the racial literacy gap in 1900 was still considerable. Hold on. The black illiteracy rate continued to fall during the first half of the 20th century, dropping to slightly more than 25% in 1920. By 1950, I estimate that between 88 and 91% of Southern blacks were literate, as measured by the census. Southern white illiteracy too declined between 1900 and 1950, but at a slower pace than black illiteracy. Consequently, the racial literacy gap fell. Let me see. I'm just trying to find the numbers. Okay, so here we are. By the 1950s, it was at 25%. Let's find out what
you got 25% illiterate rate.
Yes, illiterate rate by 1950. Okay. Brown versus Board of Education, if I recall correctly, was like 1954. Okay. Let me just look it up. Brown versus Board of Education. Yeah, May 17th, 1954. My memory's ridiculous. Now let me look at the literacy rate. Black Americans, 1980. Let's just look at 1980.
Okay.
They have it. Oh, here we are. We can just look at 1960, 6 years after Brown versus Board of Education.
Okay.
There we go. Do they separate it by race? I don't think they have it. It's hard for me to find that.
Yeah.
I do not. I don't even know what a crypto scheme is. Oh, here we go. Here we go. The number of African American adults with low literacy skills has remained relatively stable since 1992. Okay, so it definitely continued to decline. So the estimated literacy rate among African Americans adults age 15 and above in the United States is approximately 88% as of 2020. The overall literacy rate in the United States is around 86%, making the African American adult literacy rate slightly higher than the national average. African Americans' literacy rates have significantly improved over their past half century, increasing from approximately 60% in the 1960s to the current rate of around 88%. So it seems like we've largely benefited from integration and that literacy has completely declined, right? Illiteracy, excuse me,
Yeah,
has completely
but
declined.
okay. So how does that explain our black people are dropping out at a large rate at any other race dropping out? How does that explain that our
Well, let's do one at
kids
a
that's
time. One at a time. What
okay?
explains the
Oh
reason why black kids are more likely to drop out? Those
yeah.
reasons are economic. There have been plenty of studies on the subject, and almost all of
What
them.
you mean what you mean economics? What you
Well,
mean?
we can. I'll just read it. I'll find it for you. I had the same conversation with the previous person, and they determined that low-income people were significantly less likely to be able to be well nourished. They were less likely to be able to afford tutors and things like that. They were
Is that in a
all.
single parent household or two parent household?
I think in both economics have listen. While obviously economics are going to be a greater detriment in a single parent household, which I advocate
Right.
against, the fact remains even in two parent households. Economics tend to be the largest determining factor for success within high school and in education in general. That's an economic
Okay. Yeah.
problem.
Okay. I'm not understanding. What do you mean by economic problem? Like what economics do you need to stay in school?
Here, I'll just read it. Here, I'll link it to you.
Okay.
Understanding, I'm going to link it to you and so you can follow along. It's very
Yeah.
clearly an economic problem, though. It has nothing to do. It's yeah. Never mind. I don't have to go into anything else. Here's the
Yeah.
link right there.
I'm clicking on it.
Understanding the factors contributing to teen high school dropout. High school dropout remains significantly challenging in many countries, including the United States, where more than 10% of students drop out of high school before graduating. Dropping out of high school has long-term consequences, including reduced employment opportunities, lower earnings, and higher rates of poverty and crime. While many factors can contribute to high school dropout, research indicates that teens face unique challenges that can increase their risk of leaving school early. In this article, we review the literature on teen high school dropout to identify the factors contributing to the phenomenon. The review of the literature identified several factors contributing to teen high school dropout. The following are the main themes that emerged from the analysis. Number one, socioeconomic statuses. Teenagers from low-income families are more likely to drop out of high school than their peers from higher-income families. Poverty is associated with increased stress, less access to educational resources, and lower academic achievement, all of which can contribute to dropping out.
Okay.
Academic.
All right. Let's go to stop there. All right.
Okay.
So social, see, social anything is BS because why should I care what the next person have? How does what the next person have affect me?
It didn't say
That's
social, it said
total.
socioeconomic. That's not
So,
social,
oh, because it's
socioeconomic.
no, because you said it said teenagers from low income families are more like than their peers, meaning they're factoring in other people. Why? See, that's what I'm saying. Why does it matter if somebody else have more than I do? See, that's not that's irrelevant because
No.
that mean what? No. Because that means what are you teaching your kids? Are you saying are you teaching your kids you're less than because somebody has more than you? Because I was in poverty. My mom, I grew up in a single parent household, and not one time did I ever even thought about dropping out. My cousin, also one parent household. I also have other family members. I grew up in Memphis, one parent household, and at no point, and let me say this, all the people I know that dropped out well also came from single parent household, but also were told they wasn't going to be anything. So again, that's BS. It
Okay.
had that's BS.
Listen,
Yeah.
the reason why you would compare to your peers in these circumstances is because what you would do is whenever you're doing studies, you try to look at the factors that would cause it. So you take a large sample of people and you start for controlling for certain things. So you say, well, let's look. We just take the average person and this is what the income is. And then let's say if we just took only people like this, would that have an impact? And so then that's what you do. It's not about an individual comparing to his
No,
peers. It's more about the idea that we can say, these are the factors. So if we take only people who are socioeconomically compromised and we start saying, what's the dropout rate for these people exclusively? And then we say, their dropout rate is higher than the average population. So then we can say, oh, okay, not because we want to compare, but we can say, so it seems like the economic factors are likely causing this. That's why
okay,
you
no,
would do the
no,
comparison.
no. Let's do this. And then let's get deeper into it. Why are they? Why are they? in lower income, why is the parent low income? Because 80% of us are in a single parent household, and if you're the single parent household, of course you're going to be in a low income. No other race have a single parent household rate higher than 50%.
Okay, so
So
let me
why?
ask you this: if we were to control for two parent households and still look at and still look at different socioeconomic statuses, are you saying that just simply having a two parent household would fully equalize the graduation rate, or do you think that it's more likely that even if we take two parent households, that you'll find that people of lower socioeconomic statuses are more likely to drop out than their high economic high income peers? Which do you think that there's a correlation there still with socioeconomics and dropout rates, even within two parent households?
No, I don't believe that because it has nothing to do with that. You just go to school. What are you dropping out for? That's what I'm saying. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense to drop out because you're not making money or your family not making money. That don't make sense because it's a choice. You choose to drop out. So if we start encouraging our kids to not drop out, the economy would get better. Because if you drop it, like you said, if you drop out, it leaves issues having a hard time finding employment. You're making less money. And that plays a part because if you're getting older, what are you going to turn to? Crime. So it's common sense.
What
So
you're
again,
what you're
all this
basically
social.
saying is you're just saying that, hey, it's a bad idea to drop out, which I don't disagree with. What I'm saying is that
Right.
economics are one of the larger contributing factors for why people drop
No,
out. That's
that's
what
not a.
the
It
studies
doesn't.
say. Can you find me a study that disagrees with that?
It don't matter.
But you don't care
I'm
about
a person that
studies.
thinks. No, I don't care about. No, I don't care about BS studies because clearly that
So
this
a
is what I
study
got
is
BS
BS just
studies.
because it disagrees with
No,
you?
no, no, no. No, 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 no. I just said this is what I'm saying. This is what I call BS studies. When you try to take accountability away from the person. So this is taking away accountability of the person. All right. So what I mean by that is why are you for one if you're a single parent, why are you having kids outside of wedlock? Because again, like I said before the 60s we was married at a higher rate, right? So you're taking now the parents start the parents, why are you having kids out of wedlock? That's an issue because if you're not thinking about your kids future prior to being if you don't understand how the foundation of a married home is gonna put you in a way better position than a single parenthood, it had nothing to do with, so you put yourself in that position. All right. Again, but why are you dropping out? Because you're not making enough money. Okay, what is the parent doing? Are you trying to find? Are you trying to build that stable foundation at home, or are you just doing what you want? Are you partying? Are you doing so that this study don't have none of that going on because you can say all that. Black people still buy Jordans. Black people still buy iPhones. Black people still buy cars. Black people still buy rims. We have the most debt out of any other race. That don't make sense for us to be making be a low income, but we have the most consumer debt. That doesn't make sense. So you can't sit here and tell me that it has something to do with low thing that somebody can't graduate, but all these people not graduating got these iPhones, got these Jordans, got these cars, got these rims, get doing all that. Where they getting the money to do that?
Okay, so let me explain to you. The reason why low income people are significantly more likely to have more consumer debt is because large incomes tend to shield you from debt. Let me just give you like a just a random ballpark figure. If it costs, say, the average person $20,000 in consumption just to maintain a living, that's going to be food, utilities, like transportation, etc. Takes $20,000 in consumption a year. That's what you need to survive. Now, on top of that, you might have additional expenses in the form of I don't know, outings and whatever the freak. Okay. Now, if you're a
Okay.
person who only makes $35,000 a year, then that means now that you're spending, 5/7 of your freaking income on freaking or 4/7 of your income on freaking on consumption. So
And you
if
know how to fix
but
that?
hold on. So then it would make sense then that if you have all of these other additional expenses and things like transportation and so on and so forth, then yeah, that you're probably not going to be able. Of course, if you're paying for like college and things like that, then yeah, you're going to probably it starts getting obtaining more consumer debt. The problem is like for most white Americans, they've developed a cushion in the form of generational wealth. And the way they obtained that generational wealth was by government subsidies in the form of FHA loans, which gave them the ability to use equity from homes purchased with little to no interest, which they then use to pay for their students' college, pay for college themselves, leave inheritance to their children, provide better educations in the public education system, be in close proximity to job, therefore incurring lower costs and commuting and things like that, and find more job opportunities for both them and their offspring, and have a culture that was devoid of crime and things and criminality. So if that's the case, then it makes all the sense with that amount of cushion why you're seeing less consuming debt. Because what studies have determined is that Black people and white people alike, wealthy people and poor people alike, they tend to make similar financial decisions. The difference is the economic cushions that allow white people to fail upwards. That's what the truth is.
Okay. I'm sorry. You, like I said, my port keep going there. You said, what was the economic cushion? You said something about a loan. It just kind of went in. I just want to make sure. I want to hear you say that point again.
That was a lot, but okay, I'll try to
No.
condense it.
I heard kind of beginning. I'm just saying the one point where you said the academic cushion with the loan. I just kind of heard that a little bit before you broke up, and then I finished. I heard the last part. It's just what loan were you referring to when you said something about an academic cushion? That's all I'm saying.
The FHA loans,
Okay.
Yeah, those loans, what they did was they allowed white people the ability to use the equity from their homes to pay for education and their children's education, for their children's college. It kept them in close proximity to jobs and limited their the penalties they would receive in commuting and things like that. It left them able to generate better better inheritance to their children, creating better generational wealth, and things like that. So then because of that, them and their offspring were able to benefit from that. That's what created the cushion that allowed them not to need so much of their wealth as part of, like, for the basic necessities and on consumption.
See, I'm glad you said that because I'm in financial service and I help Black people do that all the time. I get into mortgage loans where, yes, they can apply and do this and do the same thing. So either way, there are still things out there Black people can do to mitigate their consumption, or their consumption debt, or wherever the case may be. And that's what I'm saying. At the end of the day, it's all about choices. That's what it boils down to. It's choices.
Okay, I love that.
We can't be mad at white people for making these choices, but then want to and then give Black people excuses for not making the choices.
But what Black people didn't have the ability. Black people didn't have FHA loans.
We do.
I said they didn't. They did not.
We're talking about today.
They didn't.
We're talking about today.
Well,
we're talking about today.
But okay, what I'm talking about today, the point that I just made was not just talking about today. The point that I just made was talking about the cushion that was developed over time, one generation ago, from people getting FHA loans. That's why I said.
But why do you care about generation ago?
Because we're talking
about white people.
Because what we're talking
why
about.
Do you care?
I'm answering your question. The reason. Okay, I think this is going to have to be the end of the conversation. We're going to go ahead and I'm going to give my final point, and then you'll be able to give yours. Okay. I think if every time I bring up all of the examples that have generated the ability to thrive and succeed and the mobility for Caucasians in this country, if your whole argument is ignore them and only focus on Black people, then I don't think you understand how large socioeconomics work. Furthermore, during your opening statement on this subject, you mentioned things like, no system put me in jail. Well, fortunately, you're one of the lucky ones. We have about 1,300 exonerations in this country a year of Black men. 1,300 exonerations. That means
and a million go into jail.
13,
so that's less than 1%.
13, but that
and
means
a million go into jail.
No, wait.
A million
do not interrupt. I'm giving my closing. I'm giving my closing statement. You can address it when you're done. Thank you. Just like I'm going to go ahead and let you. Now, I said 1,300 a year. There aren't a million Black people going to jail per year. Please don't interject with nonsense again. Let me finish. We have about 1,300 exonerations of Black men a year in prison, which means that it seems like there are plenty of Black people who are being put in jail that didn't otherwise have committed any of those types of crime. Lastly, when you say, I went to college, you went to college, and if you did go to college, you incurred a greater cost than your white counterparts. College was free until they decided that they didn't want to include undesirables, and those undesirables that they were talking about were black people. That's why the average black person leaves college with significantly more debt than their white counterparts. Black people, as it stands now, owe about $66,000 in debt for their loans because they don't have rich parents and equity from parents' homes in order to pay for their college and things like that, whereas white people do, which is why they have closer to 12 to 24,000 in student loan debt. So when you have student loan debts, when you have, obviously, we're still seeing today, right now, stings being done in which are determining that black people are steered away from mortgages and in white neighborhoods and from approvals in their loans. We're finding that appraisal rates for black homes are significantly lower, such that black people are now getting hip to this fact and putting pictures of white people inside of their homes and having white people be there during appraisals in order to achieve a 25% uptick in their appraisals. So if we're seeing, then that means then there are still systems of oppression. Oppression isn't determined by the complete elimination of all forms of success. Oppression is determined just by the fact that, hey, here is something here that limits in any capacity. There are degrees to oppression. In other words, if I start a race, if I'm doing a race and I hold all the black people back by 10 yards in a 100-yard dash, that's still oppression. Even if it's only 10 yards and black people can still succeed. If I hold them back by 2 yards, guess what? It's still oppression. Even though a lot of black people are still probably going to have the world records in those kinds of situations. Now, if I go and say black people just can't race at all, then that's a different, higher, more egregious degree of oppression. It is degreed, it is limited. And so the idea, just because there are still methods to succeed that you can thrive and overcome, is not enough to be able to say that oppression doesn't exist. I also have a mother who happened to have been a very Christian person who was able to succeed despite us being in abject poverty and got multiple degrees, went on to be one of the higher income earners. I can point out all of the miracles that God did in order to allow her to achieve the amount of success that she did, such that her children are mostly thriving and not in poverty and things like that as well. So the fact of the matter is, I do understand the importance of choices, and I understand the importance of having faith in a higher power that's able to open up opportunities for you to be able to succeed. That doesn't change the fact that when we're analyzing systems, we're looking at normative outcomes, the average outcome. And most people choose the path of least resistance, which means if the systems are designed in order to impact you negatively, that you're going to see more negative impact. And some of those people are going to end up determining that they don't want to play the game overall, which is how you get dejected, despondent people in poverty committing various types of crime and things like that, and how we get the prison systems that we have today. You can have the final word, take as long as you want, and I won't interject you rudely like you did.
All right, I'll say this. All right. To the whole exoneration point, because I had this conversation with my friend the other day. Like you said, 3,200 versus last year, where I believe roughly around 1 million black people were convicted. So if you do basic math, that's about 1%. So yes, nobody is saying everybody, or nobody is saying that every black person commits a crime or all is innocent, but the statistics is very likely if if you commit a crime that you didn't do that crime, very likely. But of course there is a small percentage of people who were falsely accused. So yes, you're right, but there's a very low percentage. So the biggest thing, like I said, I'm gonna just go back to choices. You can say all you want about what white people did, or equal outcomes. That's BS, because you shouldn't expect equal outcomes. You should expect, if I do the work, I'm gonna I get what I put in. That's what I'm looking for. You should get out what you put in. So I don't want anything given to me. So you want white people to give you loans or to give you something to say, hey, we did something, or you want to be segregated. I don't care. This is the only thing I think about when I think about oppression. Am I allowed to read? Am I allowed to educate myself? Am I allowed to build a family? Am I allowed to believe what I want to believe? Am I allowed to to start a business? If I can do all that, am I a citizen? If I can do all that, I'm good. So black people, we have that. So there's no oppression, because again, there's nothing holding us back. And there's nothing telling a black person today in 2023, or even after the 60s, that they can't get a FHA loan. There's nothing saying that a black person can have life insurance, which we don't have, to make sure that something happened, that our family still have money. There's nothing that's stopping a black person from stopping investing, stopping them from saving, which we don't do. There's not stopping a black person from starting a business again, which we're not doing that we used to do before the 60s. Even if you want to go by education, I actually don't believe in going to college anymore, even though I went to college because I think it's a scam. And you really don't even need it to be successful, depending on what field you're in. So for all those black people that's trying to go to college, I actually say don't even do that because unless you have a specific career that you want to go, but don't go just to go because it's dumb. So with that being said, the victimhood mentality at the end of the day is what me and Candace is saying, and you further prove that by bringing up what white people did, where we're killing each other at a higher rate than any other. We kill every other race at a higher rate than any other race kill us, and we kill our own race than any other race killed us. And I know you didn't bring this point up, but another thing people try to bring up is the police brutality. That's BS because on average, the average police kill more white unarmed men than they do black. And on top of that, and roughly the last, if you look at it, it's been roughly around 200, if that, of whatever. Basically, black men with no web. I can't even think of the word, but so it is roughly 40 million black people. So if police officers were really trying to off black people or had this agenda, it'd been way more than 200. So that just mathematically just don't make sense. So at the end of the day, all I'm saying and all I hear Candace Owens say, you have to look that person you look in the mirror. What can you do to better your life? No white person can help you or take anything away from you. No white person can give you anything. But what most people, black people want, they want a handout. That's why you have government assistance, which is detrimental to our community as well. So again, it's all your choices. You look in the mirror, say, what can I do to better myself? And whatever that is, make sure it's legal, it's ethical, and it's more, and you go do it. And as you put the time in and you work hard enough, you can be successful. And you are a testament to that. And your mother was a testament to that because she was able to teach you something, baby, to make you a life for yourself. No white person took anything from you. And the very fact that me and you was having this conversation today also proves that there's no oppression. Because if there was oppression, we wouldn't be able to have this conversation right now. So with all that being said, at the end of the day, it's your choice.
Okay, man. You take care.
Yeah, you too, man. Have a good one.
Yeah. Listen, it's really hard. I can't have a conversation with the person that refuses to be educated. If I can't show you, if studies don't mean anything to you, because why are we even comparing? Which is literally what's necessary in order to make a study, in order to determine anything. If that doesn't mean anything, if history doesn't mean anything, because we're only talking about right now as if the previous things had no impact on our current state, that sounds ridiculous. If we're talking about things that happened literally one generation ago, like we act like the 60s was so freaking long ago. Like by the time we passed the Fair Housing Act, my mother was 14 years old. My dad was still freaking in segregated schools during that time in the state of Florida. So the idea that like none of these things have any impact is freaking crazy. Talking about, oh, it's only 1% of people. Like, what are we even talking about? Listen, the idea that like, or even the nonsense about like, oh yeah, police aren't just often black people. Nobody's talking about often black people. It's always been about police brutality, and police brutality happens more to black people, despite the fact that black people are significantly less likely to resist arrest, yet we're brutalized at higher rates. So when we start looking at those types of things, we can see that the system is designed against us. And we can even look at things, for example, like, I don't know, all of these different police stations who are using mugshots of black men as target practice. When you can sit here and see all of that kind of information, and we have the FBI releasing reports talking about the infiltration of white supremacists into our policing. When you see those kinds of things, if you can ignore all that and just be like, nah, it's totally fine, ain't no issue, nigga, more power to you. If you choose to bury your head in the sand, go ahead and do so. But for the rest of us who got some common sense, we're going to go ahead and lean into these studies, and we're going to figure out what the freak is actually going on. Do I advocate for personal responsibility? Of course. That has nothing to do with normative outcomes. Nigga brought a butter knife to a gang fight. It's crazy. That's crazy. All right, that's that. Listen, I got a video. It's coming out 3:00, 20 minutes from now. That's going to be a conversation. So here's what happens. Listen, a lot of times I end up having debates with people, and I have debates off stream, and I'll record the conversations, but sometimes I didn't feel like releasing it. This one was with somebody who was in my stream. There was a very long back and forth between him and Zovia and Jeff talking about reparations. Then I got pissed and invited the person to a conversation. And then we had a quick call. You'll see the whole conversation. It got kind of ridiculous. I got very heated at the end of the conversation. I did start off being kind of chill, but I can't take people lying to me. And that nigga was lying to me. No, I'm for reparations, but then bring up every obfuscation you can possibly think of. So that's why I kind of like started popping off at the end. I did originally intend to be very calm, and I was originally until he kept going with the antics, and then it was like, nigga, I'm not, I can't handle this. So with that being said, be on the lookout for that video. Um, let me show you one more. I mean, let me link it to you guys, and I'm gonna go ahead and get ready. I got to get ready to dip. I'm going to TwitchCon actually today. I'm gonna be heading out in like around 4 o'clock. I want to say so. I'm gonna do the premiere. Then I'm gonna pack and be gone. Then I'm going down to TwitchCon for the very first time. Um, did he sound like Rob TV? He sounded like Rob TV that's not talking intentionally fast. And I don't think the difference between this person, I think Rob TV is actually intelligent enough to understand when he's being dishonest. I think this guy is just uninformed. I don't think he's a liar. I don't think that he's like grifting. Rob TV knows when he's being dishonest and he just does it anyway.